everybody. It's great to be back here again. Itamar, it's Friday, Parashat Chayey Sarah. Wow, it's a very powerful Shabbat. Many are going to go to Hebron, the city of our forefathers, and they're going to be at Me'arat HaMachpelah, the tomb of the patriarchs. As we all know, the great acquisition, the great purchase of Avraham Avinu, when he purchased from the children of Chet, from Ephron, an everlasting acquisition of the land. We all are familiar with the Midrash. The Midrash Rabbah brings down the three places that are mentioned in the Bible or directly purchased by our forefathers, beginning with Avraham Avinu, who purchases the tomb of the patriarchs. Later we're going to read in the coming weeks about Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, who purchases Shechem, and then finally King David, who purchases the threshing floor from Goren Ornan or Aravna, mentioned in Samuel, the book of Shmuel, and in also Chronicles, Divrei Yamim. Now, these purchases, the Midrash says, why were they so important? And the Midrash says, well, when the nations come along and they say to you, they try to make trouble for you in the future, this is not your land. You will be able to actually open up the Bible, open up the Torah, and show them that these were acquired by us. We paid them full price, full kesef, or as we say in Hebrew, silver was paid in order to purchase these places as an everlasting inheritance for the people of Israel. And the question is, of course, Hashem sees generations of all time up there in the heavens and sees all of history. But what do we know? When we're way back then, when the purchases took place, no one would ever believe what we are experiencing today. In Israel, to this very day, people are undermining our connection with the land of Israel. They have the nerve to claim, they're upset that we're building in the land. Shechem represents Samaria, Shomron. Judea is represented by Hebron. Jerusalem, of course, our united Jerusalem. They're trying to undermine war against Israel, saying we're upset with you because you're building houses in the land of Israel. Well, in a moment we're going to see what Jeremiah says about that. And if you look and you see the hatred, literally, the way Israel is outlawed, 6 organizations that they are blatant terrorist organizations, Israel outlawed them. Gantz, the defense minister of Israel, he signed on it, right? And right away there was a huge uproar. What's going on? How could these terrorist organizations be outlawed? Well, it's all connected. This is what the Midrash is telling us. God is calming us down. He's saying, don't worry, my friends. The land of Israel is an everlasting inheritance to you, the people of Israel. You've acquired the land. Just show the Bible. Cleave to the Bible, and this is our deed for the land of Israel. Now I want to show you, if we look quickly into chapter 32 of Jeremiah. There Jeremiah is having a prophecy a year before the destruction of the first temple. King at the time was Tzidkiyahu HaMelech, and he was imprisoned, a place called Chatzar HaMatara. Jeremiah was placed in prison. And why was he placed in prison for? Because the king Tzidkiyahu didn't like what he was saying. What was he saying? He's saying, well, because of what's going on, you're going to be going to exile. He was talking about the exile and what was going to happen because of sins. But in order to just shut him up, don't let him have a mouthpiece. Don't let him speak. It's wonderful, right? To be anti-democratic and just don't let people say anything or try to wipe them off certain kinds of social media because they may have different opinions than those who own the social media. Well, there it goes. Jeremiah was in prison in a place called Chatzar Matara. He couldn't, because he was saying things that he believed in, and they were the truth. They're the words of Hashem. But he didn't have any ears, he wasn't being listened to. And then God tells him to do something very special. What is he told to do? He's told to go ahead and purchase a field. Whose field? His cousin is going to come to his house, come to the prison, and he's going to ask him to fulfill his rights, as we call redemption rights. What are redemption rights? It means the closest relative of someone who's forced to sell a field is requested to let the person who has to sell the field sell it to a close relative in order to keep it within the family. So here it is, Jeremiah, his cousin, the son of Shalom, Hanamel, he comes along to visit Jeremiah in prison, And they make this whole contract, a very formal contract, and writing it down properly, and writing down the contract, and having witnesses sealed and all the way it's supposed to be done, put away in a pottery for this way, be able to stay for a long time, showing that we have this acquisition of a family plot near Anatot, which was a city of Jeremiah in Anatot, as we know today. You can go visit it it's outside Jerusalem, in an area which is part of Benjamin. And here, after this acquisition, Jeremiah mentions, and he talks about how that again fields will be purchased. So the idea is, right now, think about it. Someone could talk about the exile. The Jews were here, we said, it was a year before they were ready to go into exile. But the beauty here was that Jeremiah was told by Hashem to do a purchase. It wasn't a symbolic purchase. It was a real purchase, but it also had a lot of symbolism. It was reflecting on what was going to be in the future. And what was going to be in the future, that Israel again is going to purchase fields. Again, they will buy fields. So it's not something that, okay, here we are, a nation that was here and it's going to be over. But no, the time will come again when we return from our exile, we will again purchase fields. We will have that connection to the land and restore our lives in the land. And that is really a beautiful prophecy. I'd like to read, if we look in the chapter 34, towards the end of the chapter, Jeremiah is describing, Hashem is telling what's going to be the end of days. And he says, behold, in verse number 37, Hineni mikabtzam mikol haaretzot, I will gather them from all lands. Now obviously it's not only from Babylon. At that time they were only in Babylon, the exile. But here it's of course hinting to the future, when Israel will be scattered over all lands, and God will bring us back to the land. And then it says, Vashivotim el hamakom hazeh v'oshavtim levetach, I will bring them back to the land, and I will let them live in tranquility and safety in the land. And they will be for me a nation, I will be for them their God. And I will place within they'll have one heart and one way of fear for me. And it will be good for them and to their children after them. And I will make a covenant with them. Brit Olam, an everlasting covenant. And God says, Asher lo ashuv machorehem laitivi otam, I will not turn back anymore in Israel. Ve'yirati etein b'levavam, and I will place the fear. They will have fear in the hearts of God. They will fear, the love of Hashem will be placed. The fear in God will be in their hearts. That they will no longer turn away from Hashem. V'sasti alehem leitiv otam, and I will rejoice to do good to them. Unitatim ba'aretz hazot, and I will plant them within this land. Be'emet, b'chol libi, with all my heart, b'chol nafshi. Very powerful statement. Hashem is going to replant us in the land after being in exile. And again, I mentioned this is also referring, of course, to the end of days and messianic times which we are living in. That God will bring us back as we are witness to this today. Because thus says Hashem, just as I brought upon this nation all the difficult things, I will bring them all the good as well. All the good that I prophesied for Israel will take place. And then it goes on to say, and the field that you're saying is desolate fields will be bought in the land. This whole land was given over, captured by the Kasdim, enemy lands, enemy nations. Israel will repurchase its land, will come back to its land. Sadod bakesef yiknu, they will buy fields with money. V'chatov b'sefer v'chatom, there will be written, contracts will be written. Va'ededim, in the land of Benjamin was and around Jerusalem, and the land of Judah, Ubarei Har, and the cities of the mountains. It's basically all over Israel, and the coastal, the Barei Shvela, and the coastal cities, and the southern cities. Ki yashiv et shvutam nu Hashem, I will bring back their captivity. My friends, this is fascinating words of Jeremiah. On the eve of the destruction, we will never give up our hope. And here we see the words of Jeremiah is coming true. Is that God promised after the exiles we'll be coming back to the land. And we've returned, my friends, we were blessed to return to the land of Israel in 1948, a miracle. We reestablished our statehood state of Israel. And today we are constantly, of course, as we grow and strengthen ourselves in the land, we are being tested all the time. But the words of our prophets, that fields will be bought in the land, and our everlasting acquisition to the land holds true to this very moment. More than ever, we have to rely and strengthen ourselves with the fact that Hebron, the city of our patriarchs, this week's portion, right, so it's powerful and strong. When we think about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and our, what's it called, matriarchs, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. We think about our amazing forefathers and how they established these roots that are so deep in the land. Nothing will budge us. When people have the nerve to come along again and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this for? Why are you building? Can you imagine to come along and say to us, why are we building fields in the land? Why are we building buildings? Why are we living? That is going against, it's just like the words, it's such a rebellion against the words of Hashem in the Torah. To say, to claim that we have no right in our land. It's unbelievable. And that's an obstacle to peace. That's an obstacle to the word of Hashem that has given Israel an everlasting inheritance. We have to stand up against those who stand against Hashem and against the Torah. And we know they will not get away. They can try and think they're going to win or convince Israel, but no, Israel will continue to build and will continue to thrive in its land, and nothing will stop Israel from returning, from reaping the blessing of an everlasting nation in the land of Israel. It was given to us as an everlasting inheritance. And no one will undermine our connection to the land of Israel. That is a lie, that's falsity. It's the land of Israel. And even if those want to try to set up embassies that don't belong where they are, or try to create false nations that don't exist in the land that was given to the people of Israel, it's literally such an outright rebellion against the word of Hashem. Here in Jeremiah, in the book, of course, Genesis and Bereshit. But where does this come from? It comes from a society that is so entrenched in this post-modern world, called moderns, like they're supposed to be modern, but so entrenched in everything against the word of Hashem. Everything is to turn away, turn the backs on Hashem, turn the backs on spirituality, and only a life of materialism that just is totally disconnected to the word of Hashem. That is really what we're facing today. It's a very, very difficult time we're in. We have to wake up. We are really in a difficult situation, but of course we must have our faith. And our faith, realizing you take the beautiful example of Abraham. Chayey Sarah, the whole portion is called the Life of Salah. When we look at Sarah, we don't look at Sarah as someone who passed away. The righteous people are called alive, even after their demise, because their whole lives are or I can say a record. When you're making the old-fashioned records that they used to make, they were actually engraved. They have these like engravements that would go around. It's something that's engraved. Their life is like this, engraved on stone that can never be erased. It's something so powerful that these the lessons that we learn from them, the way they lived, the lights that they give off, they live forever. And that's why Chayey Sarah is called the Life of Salah. We look at Sarah, our amazing matriarch, and Abraham, who also is mentioned. He also passes away this portion and is buried in the tomb of the patriarchs. But they live forever. Look how every year we continue to review the portions. We go over, we learn more, we draw more faith and inspiration from their words. Those who don't turn their back to their forefathers, those who have a future. But those who turn their back to their forefathers and don't follow in their ways have no future. And this is a fact. There's a famous story of Napoleon. And he was talking to a group of soldiers. And in the crowd was one soldier that was not shaven. You have to look, you're supposed to be pretty well kept soldiers, right? They get you into trouble for not shaving. And he goes, what's going on? Why aren't you shaven? Why aren't you clean shaven? And he says, listen, right now we are in the mourning period of our temple. He goes, who are you? He goes, I'm a Jew. And this is, we are mourning the destruction of the temple. He goes, when was the temple destroyed? He goes, well, it's been a couple of thousand years, almost that it was obviously less, but it was close to 2,000 years, right? A couple hundred here or there. And he goes, and he said something very remarkable, Napoleon. He said, those who remember something that's thousands of years old and don't forget it, will sure return to that place, because they're not forgetting. That's us. We don't turn our back on the land. Those words are powerful. They come right out of the Torah. We will never turn our back on our heritage, on our forefathers, and in their light we will walk, and we will follow in their footsteps. In this land, we're here for an everlasting inheritance, and nobody will ever dare undermine our connection to the land of Israel. Shabbat Shalom, Besorot Tovot, Yeshurot V'Nechama.